Hey everyone, this is Jason Bell and this is Poker Vlog number 26. In this session, I'm at 101 Poker Club just outside of Houston, Texas. I plan to play 1-3 no limit hold'em. There is no maximum buy-in, so I plan to buy in for $500. And in this session, I plan to focus on one, putting together the pieces of the puzzle, meaning really understand my opponent's ranges, play style, and bet sizing to get a good sense as to what I'm up against. And two, use that information to exploit my opponents. Now there's a third thing I think I need to think about. Don't make decisions based off of fear. Now that's a lot to think about. You know, those three items, should I just think about one? Maybe? Maybe I should just think about the opponent's range? Or maybe two. Maybe think about range and don't make decisions based off of fear. Regardless, I'll be thinking. Okay, this is the first recordable hand of the evening, and it's actually the second hand dealt to me of the session. Haven't even received my chips from the chip runner yet, so I'm in the small blind, and I look down at Ace-Jack offsuit. It folds around to the cutoff who limps. The button folds, and this is definitely a raisable hand from this position, so I announce a raise to $15. The big blind makes the call, and the cutoff folds. So we're heads up to a flop, which is Jack 9-8 Rainbow. Alright, top pair, top kicker. However, the big blind could literally have any two cards here, except probably the premiums, like aces or kings. I announce a bet of $20, and the big blind makes the call. At this point, I'm thinking he's connected with the board in some way or another. Could be on an open-ended straight draw, could have a pair, or maybe even two pair. The turn is the Queen of Hearts. Okay, now a 10 makes the straight, and that is something that is 100% in his range, as well as a queen. I check, and he checks back. Okay, he checked, so now I'm thinking he's not that strong after all, and maybe has something like Ace-8 or Ace-9, or maybe a low pocket pair. The river is the 5 of spades. Given this updated information, I announce a bet of $35. And I can see out of the corner of my eye that he's gathering some raising chips, and that's exactly what he does. He puts in a hefty raise to $150, and man, this is now screaming a straight, and I couldn't fold fast enough. Generally, when people in low stakes raise you on the river, they're pretty nutted, so I make the fold. After the session, he said he actually had two pair, 8-5 offsuit. Not the kind of hand I was expecting, that's for sure. But this is the beginning stages of putting together the pieces of the puzzle. In this hand, as you can see, I now have my chips. I'm in the low jack position, and I look down at Ace-Jack offsuit. Yep, again. The middle position player limps, and I'm definitely raising this one up. So I raise to $15. The small blind announces that he calls, but throws in all of his chips, so technically that was a call. And the middle position player calls as well. The pot is a little under $50, and the flop is 5-10-6 with two diamonds. The small blind checks, the middle position player checks, and I'm debating whether to throw some money into this pot with my two overs here. But given the small blind was willing to put all of his money into the pot pre-flop, I think I can't go wrong with the check here, so that's what I do. The turn is the 4 of hearts. Not much going on, and it ends up checking around again. The river is the 9 of clubs. Again, everyone checks. I show my ace high, and the small blind actually shows Queen 5 of spades and takes this one down. Had I been a little bit more aggressive post-flop, I probably could have taken this one down. But facing multiple opponents that I don't have a read on quite yet, especially this early in the session, I think checking down was an okay play here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, in this hand I'm in the under the gun position, and I look down at King-Queen offsuit. I'm first to act, so I raise to $11. It folds around to the button who makes the call, and the big blind calls as well. So we're three ways to a flop, which is King, Deuce, King, Rainbow. Okie dokie. Big blind checks, and I'm super nutted here. What's the proper play? I don't want to scare them off, so I make the check, and the button checks as well. The turn is the 10 of diamonds. Big blind checks, and now I've got to start putting some money into this pot, so I put out a bet of $20. However, both the button and the big blind make the fold. Bummer on this one, but at least glad I was able to take something here. Okay, folks, you're going to like this one. In this hand, I'm in the big blind position, and I look down at 8-10 offsuit. The under the gun +1 limps, the low jack raises to $15, the hijack calls the $15, the small blind calls, and I've got some equity here, so I make the call, and the +1 calls as well. We are very multi-way into a flop, which is Queen 5-9 with two clubs. The small blind checks, I check, and it ends up checking around. The turn is the 3 of clubs. It ends up checking around again, so at this point I'm a bit surprised someone hasn't connected with the board yet and bet. The river is the 7 of hearts. Small blind checks, and for some reason I thought I had made a straight here. I guess I misread the board and I put out a bet of $40 and it ends up getting through. Everyone folds. Holy cow. Well, it pays to be aggressive and I will take it. Okay, in this hand there's a $6 button straddle, and at 101 when you straddle on the button, the small blind is the first to act. Here, I'm in the middle position and I'll look down at pocket fours. The small blind folds, the big blind calls the $6 straddle. I call, hope to do some set mining, however the cutoff raises to $25. Both the button and the big blind fold and I make the call. If I completely whiff the flop, no harm, no foul, I'm out of this one pretty easy. So we're heads up to a flop, which is 8 queen 5 rainbow. Alright, I completely whiff and check. Pretty much gonna fold to any bet, and the cutoff bet's a hefty $50. No way I'm even thinking about this one, so I make the fold. Only reason I put this hand in this video here was to explain the button straddle a bit. Alright, on to the next hand. In this hand, I'm in the under the gun +1 position, and I look down at ace jack of clubs. I open for $15, and it folds around to the button who makes the call. What I've noticed so far about this guy is that he plays pretty straight up and tight and will fold to pretty much any aggression. So we're heads up to a flop, which is queen king 4 with 2 spades. Pretty much missed here. I guess technically I have a gutter, but a c-bet may win this thing right here, so that's what I do. I put out a c-bet of $20, and he ends up folding pretty quickly. Another quick hand, but I'll take it. Okay, in this hand I'm in the small blind and I'll look down at king jack offsuit. The under the gun limps, the middle position player limps, the hijack limps, I complete, don't think this is a good hand to really raise here. Case could be made to fold here as well, but I was in the mood to gamble a bit, and the big blind checks as well. So we're 5 ways to a flop, which is 3 queen 8, all clubs. Okay, so I've got some backdoor possibilities here. I check, the big blind bets $10, the under the gun calls, both the middle position and hijack players fold, and I make the call. We're 3 ways to a turn, which is the 10 of spades. Okay, I've been upgraded to an open-ender. I check to the aggressor, and he bets $25 this time around. The under the gun calls, and I call as well with my open-ender and jack-high flush draw. The river is the 4 of spades. Alright, didn't hit anything, and I'm pretty much done with this hand. I check to the big blind, and this time he puts out a bet of $60. The under the gun player folds, and I fold as well. After the session, this guy said he flopped 2 pair with queen 3 offsuit. Alright. At this point in the session, I've added on for an additional $200, so I'm in the game now for a total of $700. Now at 101, every time there's a dealer change, there's a $10 PLO double board bomb pot. So what happens is everyone who wants to play puts $10 into the pot. Then 4 cards are dealt to each player, just like PLO. However, the difference is that the dealer goes ahead and deals 2 flops, a top board and a bottom board. Then the betting begins to the immediate left of the dealer button, where the small blind would be. So in this hand, I'm in the under the gun position, and I look down at 10-10 ace 3. The top board is jack queen 4 with 2 spades, and the bottom board is 9 ace 10 with 2 spades. It checks to me, and this is a pretty darn good flop for my hand, so I put out a bet of $50. The cutoff calls the $50, and the button calls as well. We're 3 ways to a couple of turns, which is the king of hearts for the top board, and the 4 of hearts for the bottom board. Alright, so now I've got the nuts on the top board, and still a set on the bottom board, hoping the bottom board will pair up. This time I'm going to put out a bet of $100. The cutoff calls and the button puts in his remaining chips, which was $95. So we've got a $10 side pot to go along with the $515 main pot. The river for the top board is the 5 of diamonds, and for the bottom board is the king of spades. Very unlikely I'm going to win the bottom board at this point with the front door flush hitting as well as the straight possibility. So I check and the cutoff checks as well. I show my hand and the cutoff shows ace queen jack 3, and we split the $10 side pot. The button shows, and I was unable to see what he had, but he didn't win any of the boards, so the cutoff and I split the main pot as well. Decent sized pot here. Okay, in this hand I'm in the big blind, and I look down at 10-9 of hearts. The middle position player limps, the cutoff limps, the small blind completes, and I make the check. I think some of the time here with this hand a case could be made to put in a raise, but I make the check. There are 4 ways to a flop, which is 8, 5, 10 rainbow. Alright, top pair average kicker. Small blind checks, and I think I want to start building the pot a bit right here, so I put in a bet of $10. The middle position player folds, the cutoff calls, and the small blind folds. Okay, so what's the cutoff's range here? Is he limped pre-flop? It's certainly possible he's on a straight draw with something like 6-7 suited, or maybe jack 9, or even queen jack. Could have a mid pocket pair like 7s or 9s as well. Small chance he could have jacks. Not uncommon for folks to limp with jacks at these stakes, and I actually saw a guy early in the session limp from a late position with kings. So it's not impossible. The turn is the 10 of diamonds. Alright, I've upgraded to trips. This time I put out a pot-sized bet of $30, and the cutoff makes the call. It's unlikely he's got a 10 here as well, so I'm still thinking he's on a straight draw or maybe even has jacks here. The river is the 4 of spades. This time I want to charge him if he does have a higher pocket pair, so I put out a bet of $100. He actually thinks about this for a bit and makes the fold, so I take this one down. Okay folks, after rewatching this hand while making this video, I couldn't help but laugh a bit. The guy to my right is a regular, but he also likes to drink quite a bit while he plays, so he's a bit sauced up at this point in the session. He also likes to chat a lot, and I mean a lot. In this hand, he's straddled from the button. I'm in the small blind, and I look down at ace-queen offsuit. I open for $20, and it folds all the way back around to the button, who asks if I'm videoing, and I said I was, so he said, "Alright, I'll make the call, let's gamble a bit." So he does, and we're heads up to a flop, which is 8, 7, 10 with 2 diamonds. He could literally have any 2 cards. 10 deuce or even 7 deuce is not out of the question. I've got some overs here, so I see bet for $20, and the button makes the call. The turn is the jack of diamonds, so the front door flush gets there, but I'm not really concerned about that. His speech is slurring quite a bit at this point, and I barrel for another street and put out a bet of $50, and the button makes the call again. Now I've witnessed he's called with air many times during this session already against other players. He's been bleeding chips constantly throughout the evening so far. I think he may have lost close to $1,000 at this point. The river is the queen of hearts. Alright, now I've got graded to top. Still don't think he's got much, so I put out a bet of $75, and he thinks about this for a while and actually turns over his hand, showing jack 4 offsuit. He thinks out loud for a bit and ends up folding, so I take this one down. In this hand, there's another $6 button straddle on. I'm in the under the gun position, and I look down at pocket jacks. Oh yeah. Small blind calls the $6, the big blind calls, and I'm definitely raising this one up. So I raise the $35. The low jack calls $35, the small blind calls, and the big blind calls. Man alive. Guess I didn't raise large enough to single anyone out here. I mean, when you think about it, you're generally supposed to raise 3 times the largest bet, right? Plus add any additional money that was put in the pot. So if the straddle is $6, 3 times 6 is 18, plus the $12 the small blind and big blind put in the pot, so that's $30. And here I put in $35. I guess these guys just like to gamble it up, alright? So we're 4 ways to a flop, which is ace, deuce, queen with 2 spades. Well, I'm probably pretty done with this hand. Not a very good flop. The small blind checks, the big blind checks, I check, and the low jack checks as well. So it ends up checking around. The turn is the 4 of spades, so the front door flush gets there. Plus, there are 2 overs to my jack, so I'm folding to pretty much any bet at this point. It ends up checking to the low jack, who puts out a bet of $50. The small blind folds, the big blind calls the $50, and I make the fold. River is the 9 of clubs. This time the big blind leads for $125, which covers the low jack, who puts her remaining stack in. The big blind shows the king high flush, and she shows ace 4 for the 2 pair. The big blind ends up taking this one down. Okay folks, we have a new dealer, so this is a $10 PLO double board bomb pot hand. There are 7 folks in the hand, so the pot is immediately $70. I'm on the button and I look down at king 6 deuce 5. The top flop is king, king, queen, rainbow, and the bottom flop is 6 deuce 4 with 2 clubs. Alright. Trips on the top and 2 pair on the bottom. Doesn't get much better than that. It checks to the hijack, who bets $50. I call the $50 and probably could have put in the raise here, but I don't want to scare anyone else off. However, the remaining players fold anyways. The top turn is the ace of hearts and the bottom is the 7 of clubs. The hijack doesn't have much left, just under a pot-sized bet. He checks and I check as well, planning to get it all in on the river. The top river is the queen of hearts and the bottom is the deuce of diamonds. Still have trips on the top board and I'm bowed up on the bottom. Hijack bets $75 and I of course raise all in, which is $145 effective, and he makes the quick call. I show my cards and he shows 6-4 king 3. I take the bottom board and we chop the top board, so I win 3/4 of this pot. I'll take it. Nice sized pot here. Okay, so you might be wondering what the +1 means at the end of 1-3 No Limit Hold'em in the thumbnail. Some of you might know already, but others might not. There's actually an Omaha button on the table that moves counterclockwise, and when both the main button and the Omaha button meet up, we play a regular hand of PLO. Not a double board bomb pot, but a regular PLO hand. In this hand, I'm in the middle position, and I look down at king, deuce, king, ace. Not double suited, but a pretty strong hand nonetheless. The under the gun limps, the +1 limps. I raise the $16. The button calls, the small blind calls, the under the gun calls, and the +1 calls as well. Jeez Louise. We are very multi-way into a flop, which is 6-9 deuce rainbow. Alright, I still have kings and have connected a tad with the board. It checks to the button, who bets $30. The small blind calls, the big blind calls, the under the gun calls, the +1 folds, and I make the call as well. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm pretty much done with this hand at this point. It checks to the button again, who bets $100 this time, which was the last of his chips. The small blind folds, the under the gun calls the $100, and I make the fold. No way I'm sticking around. They decide to run it twice. The first river card is the 5 of hearts, and the second river is the 7 of clubs. The under the gun shows 7, 8, 4, ace, and the button shows ace, ace, 5, 8, and they chop the pot, both with the straight to the 9. Okay, in this hand I was in the mood to play a tad bit looser, plus the guy to my right, yep, same guy who's been boozing it up all night, was in the big blind, so it's much likelier he'd call if I put in a raise. So here I'm first to act, and I'll look down at 9, 7 of diamonds. I open for $15, plus 1 makes the call, and it folds all the way around to the big blind, who min raises to $30. I make the call, of course, and the plus 1 calls as well. So we're 3 ways to a flop, which is 9, queen, 10, rainbow. Alright, I've got a piece of this board, but it's a pretty draw-heavy flop. The big blind opens for $55, and you know, given that he min-raised pre-flop this time, I don't think he's got just any 2 cards here. He could have any of the premiums down to suited connectors and possibly even small pocket pairs. I make the call and plan to proceed cautiously, and the plus 1 player folds. We're heads up to a turn, which is the 3 of clubs. This is a pretty big blank here. The big blind keeps chatting it up and decides to check. I'm honestly not sure what to make of this. Is my third pair any good here? I check as well. The river is the 8 of clubs. This time the big blind bets $75, and you know what? A jack wins it here, a flush wins it here, and I've got only third pair. I lay this one down. After he throws his cards into the middle, people were asking what he had, and he shows pocket 7s. This one tilts me a bit for sure. Still trying to figure out how to play against this guy and take advantage. In this hand, I'm in the hijack position, and I look down at queen 8 of diamonds. I'm still a tad tilted from the previous hand. Plus 1 limps, the middle position player limps, the low jack limps, and yep, this is the same guy. I decide to raise this one up, so I bet $20. Plus 1 makes the call, the middle position player folds, and the low jack makes the call as well. So we're 3 ways to a flop, which is jack, king, ace with 2 clubs and a spade. Yep, not a very good flop for my hand. Plus 1 checks, and the low jack bets a bit out of turn and puts out $75. Definitely not sticking around, but how do you play against someone like this? Possibly tighten up a bit? I make the fold, and the plus 1 folds as well. Low jack ends up showing queen 9 offsuit. Man. Okay, this is the final recorded hand of the evening. We have a new dealer, so this is a PLO double board bomb pot. There are 7 players, so the pot is $70. I'm in the middle position, and I look down at jack, jack, ace, queen. Pretty darn strong here. The top flop is jack 8-5 with 2 spades, and the bottom flop is 3-3-7 with 2 diamonds. Alright, I've pretty much got the top board wrapped up. Couldn't be much better of a flop. Bottom board, not so much. Small blind checks, the big blind bets $50. The under the gun calls $50, and I think I want to raise this one up. 2 players acted before me, so I might get both of them to call, so I raise to $150. It folds around to the big blind, who jams for $200. The under the gun calls, and I put in the additional $50. Pot is brewing here, over $650, and we are 3 ways to a turn, which is the 7 of spades for the top board and the 6 of diamonds for the bottom board. Alright. I've got the nuts on the top board, the under the gun player checks, and I check as well, again with the plan to put some more of my poker funds into this now side pot on the river. The river is the 9 of clubs for the top board and the 10 of hearts for the bottom board. The under the gun checks, and I put out a bet of $100. The under the gun player thinks about this for a bit and ends up folding, so I take my $100 back, and now I'm up against the big blind for the main pot. The big blind shows king, king, 8, queen. Okay, not quite sure what he was going for, but he ends up winning the bottom board with the kings, and we end up splitting the pot.
All right, what a session. I played for 5 hours. In for 700, out for 675, for a loss of 25 bucks. This was another one of those sessions where I was completely card dead, and I actually made most of my money on the PLO bomb pot hands. You know, it seems like I'm in a little bit of a rut right now, but that's okay. I'm going to keep my head up. I'm going to enjoy myself, have fun, keep studying. Everyone, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and have a good one.